She blind dates with a broke man, not knowing he was a hidden millionaire in disguise. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain had not stopped all afternoon in downtown Toronto. The sky hung low and gray over Queen Street, and the café windows glowed golden against the wet sidewalks. Inside, the soft hum of chatter mixed with the hiss of the espresso machine. Claire Mitchell wiped her palms on her coat, trying to calm her nerves before stepping inside. Her reflection in the glass reminded her how out of place she looked among the city's polished crowd, second-hand dress, scuffed flats, and a purse that had seen better days. But she had promised her friend Sophie she would show up. She found the small table by the window, the one marked with a napkin that read Table 9. She looked around. That was when a man walked in, water dripping from his hair, jacket worn thin, sneakers damp. He scanned the room, eyes uncertain, then stopped when he saw her. "Hi," Claire said, standing awkwardly. "You must be Nathan, right?" He hesitated, then smiled, just enough to show a dimple. "Yeah, sorry I am late." His voice was soft, almost shy. He sat down, brushing the rain from his sleeves. The waiter came by, and Nathan ordered only water. Claire frowned slightly but said nothing. The silence between them stretched until she forced a smile. "Blind dates are strange, huh? My friend said you were a little quiet. Guess she was right." Nathan chuckled under his breath. Guess she was. They started talking about small things, weather, favorite books, how bad Toronto traffic had been that week. Claire laughed nervously, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Nathan listened more than he spoke, nodding often, eyes gentle. For a moment the storm outside faded, and it felt like two strangers finding calm in the middle of chaos. When the bill arrived, Nathan patted his pockets and froze. His face turned red. "I am so sorry. I must have left my wallet at home. I swear I will pay you back." Claire's instinct told her to wave it off. She pulled out a few crumpled bills and handed them to the waiter. "It is fine. Just buy me coffee next time." Nathan looked at her, surprised, almost speechless. "Thank you. Most people would have walked out by now." "It is just coffee," Claire said with a shrug, though her smile was tired. "We have all had rough days." Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Nathan offered to walk her to the corner, and they stood under the same umbrella, close enough that she could hear his quiet breathing. There was something about him, an honesty she could not quite name. When they parted ways, Claire watched him disappear into the blur of city lights, unaware that this broke man she just paid coffee for was anything but ordinary. Somewhere behind that worn jacket and uncertain smile was a secret that would soon turn her world upside down. The next morning, Claire woke to the dull sound of traffic below her apartment window. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like wet pavement and coffee grounds. She sat up slowly, her back aching from the worn-out couch that doubled as her bed. The envelope with the overdue rent notice sat on the table, half buried under a pile of bills. She glanced at it, then turned away, reaching for her phone. No new messages. Not from the accounting firm she had interviewed with. Not from Nathan, the man from the blind date. She let out a quiet laugh. Why would he call? She whispered to herself. It was just coffee. And a mistake. Lo! That afternoon, Claire took the streetcar to her second job at a corner bakery. The sweet smell of bread filled the air, but her stomach was tight with worry. Her manager reminded her that her hours were being cut next week. She smiled politely, pretending not to panic. After her shift, she bought a small sandwich with her last few dollars and walked home through the crowded streets of Toronto's downtown core. The city lights flickered on one by one, glowing through the mist. At the entrance to her building, a man was sitting on the sidewalk, shivering beneath an old army jacket. His hands were red from the cold, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Trying to get home. Need $10 for the bus." Claire hesitated. She reached into her coat pocket. The exact amount sat folded there, the last of her money until payday. Logic told her to keep it, but something in her heart pushed back. She knelt down and pressed the bill into his hand. "Here. Please get something warm to eat too." The man blinked, startled. "Thank you. No one even looked at me today." Claire smiled softly. "It is not much, but I hope it helps." She stood, turned and walked away before he could say more. Her stomach twisted with fear, but also something lighter like a spark of peace. The following morning, Claire received an email from the company she had interviewed with. "We regret to inform you." She closed her laptop before finishing the sentence. For a long time, she just sat still, staring at the rain streaks on her window. The city below moved on without her, cars, umbrellas, laughter, all flowing past like a current she could not keep up with. By nightfall, her landlord knocked on her door. "Claire, rent is 3 days overdue again. I cannot wait much longer." "I know," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I am trying," he sighed. "You are a good tenant, but I have another applicant ready to move in next week." "Otto." She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. When he left, she packed a few clothes into her backpack, folded the picture of her mother, and slipped it between the pages of an old book. That night, she walked to the 24-hour public library near Spadina Avenue, found an empty corner behind the shelves, and sat down on the carpet. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. 2 nights later, she was asked to leave. The security guard looked tired when he said, "I am sorry, miss. You cannot stay here overnight." The park benches were cold, but they were free. She wrapped herself in her jacket and tried to sleep beneath the faint glow of a streetlight. The stars above Toronto were faint, swallowed by the city's haze. Days turned into weeks. She went from one job center to another, filling out applications that never brought a reply. Yet every time she thought about that night, the man in the army jacket, his surprised eyes, his quiet thank you, she felt something steady inside her. A small reminder that even in her lowest moment, she still had the power to give. One gray morning, she walked past a small church offering free soup lunches. She hesitated, embarrassed, but hunger won. Inside, volunteers moved quickly behind the counter. The room smelled of tomato soup and warm bread. Claire took a tray, sat at a corner table, and ate in silence. Then she heard a voice behind her, calm, familiar. "Mind if I sit here?" She looked up and froze. It was Nathan. His hair was neatly combed, his jacket new, but his eyes were exactly the same. Gentle, warm. "Hi," he said quietly, setting down his tray. "I did not expect to see you here." Claire blinked, unsure if she should feel happy or ashamed. "I could say the same." He smiled, studying her for a moment. "You look like someone who could use a second cup of coffee." Claire stared at him, remembering the calf, the rain, and the forgotten wallet. She nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Only if you are buying this time." Nathan laughed, soft and genuine. "Deal." And for the first time in weeks, Claire felt the weight on her shoulders ease just a little. She did not know yet that this simple meeting, in a church basement on a rainy morning, would mark the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Claire followed the address Nathan had written on the note. It led her to a quiet side street in downtown Toronto, where the early winter wind brushed through rows of bare trees. The building in front of her looked nothing like what she expected. It was not a cafe or a restaurant. It was a community center, painted a gentle shade of blue with a small sign that read, "Open Hands Outreach." Inside, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. Dozens of volunteers moved around in warm jackets, organizing food boxes, handing out blankets, and greeting everyone who walked through the door. Claire hesitated near the entrance until Nathan appeared from behind a stack of boxes. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair a little messy, but his face brightened when he saw her. "You came," he said. "I said I would," she replied. "I just did not expect this." Nathan handed her a pair of gloves. "Good. You can help me pack the food kits." For hours, they worked side by side. Nathan guided her through the process, teaching her how to label each bag, how to make sure the children's boxes had small treats, and how to fold the blankets so they fit neatly in the crates. He treated everyone with quiet respect, from the elderly volunteers to the young man sweeping the floor. No one there seemed to know anything about him beyond his first name, and yet everyone smiled when he walked by. During a break, Claire sipped hot chocolate from a paper cup, watching Nathan talk with a mother and her young son. He crouched down to the boy's level, laughing as he helped tie the child's scarf. Something in that small moment struck her the way he carried warmth without trying, as if it came naturally. When he came back to the table, she asked softly, "How long have you been doing this?" Nathan leaned against the counter. "A while. I used to volunteer here years ago. After a long time away, I realized I missed it." Claire nodded, still unsure what a long time away meant. She wanted to ask more but stopped herself. There was a kind of sadness beneath his smile, the kind that came from seeing too much of the world. As the afternoon faded, the volunteers began to clean up. Snow started to fall again, light flakes swirling through the open door each time someone left. Nathan turned to Claire. "Thank you for helping today. You were a natural." She smiled, brushing the flour from her hands. It felt good doing something that mattered. Tweo. Nathan hesitated, then said, "There is something I want to show you tomorrow. Same time?" "Sure," she said, curiosity sparking in her eyes. The next day, he took her on a walk through the city. They passed the frozen lakefront, where the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from ice skaters nearby. He told her about the people the outreach center helped: the homeless, the jobless, the ones who had simply lost their way. He spoke not with pity but with empathy, as if he understood them personally. They stopped at a small cafe near Kensington Market. The aroma of roasted beans and cinnamon filled the air. Nathan ordered 2 cups of coffee and placed one in front of her. "You said I owed you coffee," he said with a grin. Claire laughed softly. "It took you long enough." He raised his cup in a toast. Better late than never. Sunday. They sat there for hours, talking about life, dreams, and the strange ways people crossed paths. For the first time in months, Claire forgot about the weight of her unpaid bills and her uncertain future. Nathan had a way of making her feel seen, not pitied. As the sun dipped behind the high-rises, he said, "I want to help you, Claire. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I see what you can do. You are capable of more than you realize." His words caught her off guard. "Why would you say that? You barely know me." "Maybe," he replied, "but sometimes it only takes one look to know someone is meant for something bigger." She looked out the window, unsure what to say. A strange mix of hope and suspicion filled her chest. No one had talked to her like that in a long time. When they said goodbye, Nathan slipped her a small envelope. "Open it when you get home," he said with a smile. Later that night, in her tiny apartment, Claire opened it. Inside was a simple invitation printed on ivory paper. It read, "Novareach Foundation Annual Gala. Honoring the spirit of community." At the bottom, handwritten in neat blue ink, were the words, "Your kindness deserves a place among the people who make a difference. 9C." Claire's heart pounded. She read the initials twice. N.C. Nathan Cole. She stared at the invitation, realizing for the first time that the man she met at a soup kitchen might not be who he claimed to be. And tomorrow, she would find out the truth. The night of the gala arrived with a cold wind sweeping through the streets of downtown Toronto. Claire stood outside the Grand Hotel, staring at her reflection in the glass doors. The borrowed navy dress from her friend Sophie fit well enough, though the hem brushed awkwardly against her ankles. She took a deep breath, clutching the small invitation card with the words, "Novareach Foundation Annual Gala." Her heart pounded as she walked inside. The ballroom glowed with gold light. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above tables covered in white linen and roses. Waiters moved like clockwork, serving wine and hors d'oeuvres. Claire had never been anywhere like this in her life. She tried to stay near the wall, hoping to blend in, but everything about her felt out of place: the shoes that pinched, the purse that was too small, the quiet fear that she did not belong. Then she saw him. Nathan, standing on the stage near the microphone, dressed in a tailored black suit. He looked nothing like the man she had met at the soup kitchen. The same calm eyes, yes, but the rest of him carried the weight of command. People moved aside when he passed. Cameras flashed. A man beside her whispered, "That is Nathan Cole, founder and CEO of Novareach. He rebuilt the company after his father passed." The words echoed in her ears. CEO, founder. She stared, frozen, as Nathan adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight we celebrate compassion. Real change begins when someone decides to act, even in the smallest way. A meal, a blanket, a cup of coffee." The screen behind him lit up with photographs of community projects, the food drives, the shelters, the volunteers. And then, suddenly, a picture appeared of a familiar CAF receipt, the same one Claire had paid for weeks ago. Her own handwriting was clear across the top where she had scribbled a note, "Pay it forward," Nathan continued, his voice steady but warm. "Sometimes a single act of kindness reminds us who we want to be. To the person who taught me that, you know who you are. Thank you." Claire's breath caught. The room spun around her. She could not move. Nathan's eyes scanned the crowd, and for a brief moment they met hers. His expression softened, but she turned away before he could step down from the stage. She rushed toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Outside, the wind hit her face, cold and sharp. She could not tell if she felt angry or betrayed. Maybe both. Minutes later, she heard his voice behind her. "Claire, please wait." She stopped, but did not turn. "You lied to me." "I did not mean to," Nathan said quietly. "I needed to understand the people I was trying to help. I wanted to see the world without the filter of money or my last name. You were the first person who treated me like a human being, not a headline. You should have told me who you were," she said, her voice trembling. "All this time, I thought we were equals." "We are," he said softly. "I did not want my name to change what you saw in me." Claire finally turned to face him. The lights from the hotel cast a golden halo around them, snow beginning to fall once more. "You do not get it, Nathan. You have choices. People like me, we live with what we are given. You wanted to play poor. I have been trying to survive." Nathan took a step closer, regret shadowing his eyes. "You are right. I cannot undo what I hid. But please, believe me when I say that everything I felt with you was real." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the distance between their worlds felt impossible. She shook her head slowly. "You have a foundation to run, a world I do not belong to. Thank you for the invitation, but I should go." Nathan did not follow her this time. He stood there in silence, watching as she disappeared into the snowfall outside the hotel entrance. As Claire walked away, her heels sinking into the slush, she whispered to herself, "Some mistakes are too big to forgive." But deep down, her heart ached with something else, a quiet hope she could not completely bury, the echo of a connection that still refused to fade. The snow outside the hotel kept falling through the night, layering the streets of Toronto in a quiet, white stillness. Claire walked for blocks without knowing where she was going. Her breath formed pale clouds in the air, and each step echoed with the dull ache of disbelief. She felt foolish for letting herself care, for believing that someone like Nathan could ever truly see her as an equal. Days passed. She returned to her old routine morning shifts at the bakery, long evenings alone in her small apartment. The world kept moving as if nothing had happened. But every now and then she caught her reflection in the window and saw the faint trace of a girl who had once dared to hope. At the soup kitchen, volunteers whispered about how the Novareach Foundation had just announced a massive community grant. Claire ignored it, pretending she did not hear Nathan's name mentioned again. She told herself she was done caring, that their story had ended the moment she walked out of that gala. One evening, as she was closing the bakery, the bell above the door rang. A delivery man stood there, holding a plain brown envelope. "Delivery for Miss Claire Mitchell." She frowned. "From who?" He shrugged. "No name, just this address." Inside the envelope was a letter written in Nathan's familiar handwriting. "Claire, I understand why you walked away. You were right. I had the freedom to pretend, and you did not. I cannot change that, but I can try to make something good from what I learned. Tomorrow, Open Hands Outreach will reopen after renovations. There is something there that belongs to you. I will not be there, but I hope you come. Nathan." Claire read the letter twice before folding it carefully into her coat pocket. The next afternoon, she stood outside the same blue community center where she had first volunteered with him. The snow had melted, replaced by crisp sunlight reflecting off the wet pavement. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance, volunteers, families, and local reporters. The building looked brand new, with fresh paint and a new sign over the door. The Claire Mitchell Program for Community Kindness. For a moment she could not move. Her throat tightened as she looked at the sign again, making sure she was not imagining it. Inside, a volunteer greeted her warmly. "You must be Claire. Nathan told us you would come." She walked through the renovated hall. There were photographs on the walls of the outreach programs, each labeled with names of donors and partners. But at the end of the corridor hung one simple frame. Behind the glass was the same coffee receipt she had paid for on their blind date, perfectly preserved. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Kindness starts small," Claire reminded us all. Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she stood silently, hands trembling. He had turned her single act of generosity into something that would live on far beyond them both. From behind her, a familiar voice spoke softly. "I was not supposed to be here, but I could not stay away." She turned. Nathan stood by the door. No suit, no entourage, just a simple gray sweater and that same calm smile. "I thought you said you would not come," she said quietly. "I said I should not. But I needed to say thank you." Claire shook her head, laughing through her tears. You did all of this. You should be thanking yourself. Nathan stepped closer. You gave me perspective. You showed me what my money could never buy, what real compassion looks like. The room fell silent around them. Claire looked up at the framed receipt again, then back at him. You did not have to put my name on this. I wanted people to remember the person who believed that a cup of coffee could make a difference, he said gently. Because it did. It changed me. Yemble. For a long moment they stood there in the quiet hum of the rebuilt center, surrounded by the soft light of something that felt like forgiveness. Claire smiled faintly. So what now? Nathan met her eyes. Now we start over. No disguises, no lies. She hesitated, then nodded. Then maybe this time I will let you buy the coffee first. Nathan laughed softly. Deal. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, shining over Toronto's skyline. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt the warmth of a new beginning, a second chance born from one small act of kindness that had changed everything. The weeks that followed felt like the first breaths of spring after a long winter. Toronto's streets slowly thawed, and Claire began to see the city differently. The new outreach program kept her busy, and she threw herself into the work, completely organizing food drives, connecting with local shelters, and helping young volunteers who reminded her of who she used to be. Everywhere she went, people recognized her name from the plaque at Open Hands. It embarrassed her at first, but Nathan had been right. One small act could ripple outward and change more lives than she ever imagined. Nathan stopped by often, not as the CEO with a title, but as a friend who helped serve meals or carry boxes of supplies. They worked side by side, laughing over spilled soup or lost paperwork. Their rhythm returned naturally, the same quiet ease they had shared before the truth came out. The walls that had stood between them began to fade. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the city, they took a walk along the frozen edge of Lake Ontario. The air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of gold and lavender. Claire wrapped her scarf tighter, watching the reflection of the skyline shimmer on the water. I never thought I would see my name on a building, she said, half laughing, half in disbelief. Nathan smiled. You earned it. What you did reminded people what compassion actually looks like. Claire shook her head. All I did was buy a man a cup of coffee. He looked at her gently, and that man built an entire program because of it. I guess you could say we both changed each other. She smiled, her breath fogging in the air. For a long moment they stood quietly, listening to the sound of the lake lapping against the rocks. Nathan turned toward her. There is something I have been wanting to tell you. Claire looked up, curious. What is it? He hesitated, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. I am stepping back from Novareach for a while. I want to focus on the foundation, the work that matters. Her brows lifted in surprise. You are leaving your company? Not leaving, he said softly. Just shifting. I spent years building walls of glass and steel. Now I want to build something that feeds people instead of egos. She nodded slowly, understanding. That sounds like the Nathan I met at the soup kitchen. He smiled. That is the Nathan I want to be again. They continued walking, the quiet between them comfortable. At one point, Claire slipped on a patch of ice, and he reached out instinctively, steadying her by the arm. For a heartbeat, they were close enough to feel each other's breath. She laughed nervously, her cheeks warm against the cold air. Careful, he said softly, still holding her hand. You keep saving me from myself. Claire met his eyes and whispered, Maybe we save each other. Nathan squeezed her hand lightly before letting go. Maybe we do. 1. A few days later, the outreach program hosted its first community dinner under the new name. Hundreds of people came, families, students, volunteers, even the man who once sat outside her building with the cardboard sign. Claire stood on the small stage, thanking everyone who made it possible. Nathan stood off to the side, watching her with quiet pride. When the crowd began to leave, he approached her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I kept my promise, he said with a smile. She laughed softly. You remembered. Always, he replied. Though I still owe you a lifetime's worth. She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing for a brief moment. The warmth of the coffee seeped into her hands, but the warmth she felt came from something deeper, something steady and real. As the evening lights glowed over the city and music played in the background, Nathan leaned closer and said, Claire, I meant what I said before. No disguises, no walls. Whatever happens next, I want it to be honest. She met his gaze, her eyes bright. Then let it be honest. And as they stood together beneath the soft glow of the string lights, the noise of the city fading around them, Claire finally understood what Nathan had been trying to tell her. All along, kindness was not just something you gave, it was something you lived. It was the truth that had brought them together. And now, it was the reason they stayed. The first real test of their new beginning came a month later. The Open Hands Foundation had grown faster than anyone expected, and with growth came attention. One cold February morning, Claire arrived at the office to find a headline flashing across her phone screen. Former CEO's secret romance with community program director. Is Novareach's charity just a love story? Her heart dropped. The article was filled with photographs of her and Nathan taken at the community dinner, smiling and talking. The reporter questioned whether the outreach work was just a billionaire's vanity project. Within hours, donations slowed, and emails flooded in demanding answers. When Nathan arrived at the office, his expression was calm but tired. "I already spoke to our PR team," he said. "They will release a statement." Claire crossed her arms. "A statement will not change what people believe. They think this entire project was built on a lie." He shook his head. "Then we will show them the truth." That afternoon, they gathered all the volunteers and the families who had benefited from the program. Cameras rolled as Nathan stood before them, not as a CEO, but as a man willing to face judgment head-on. "I started Open Hands to reconnect with the world outside the glass walls I built for myself," he said. "Claire did not know who I was when she offered me kindness. She changed the way I understood success. This foundation exists because of her, not because of my name." When Claire stepped up beside him, her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "The work we do here is not about either of us. It is about every person who ever needed a meal, a place to belong, or a chance to be seen. Kindness started this. Kindness will keep it alive." The crowd broke into applause. Cameras flashed, but this time, the story was theirs to tell. That night, the news coverage shifted from scandal to redemption. Donations began returning within days. Later, when the office had emptied and only the city lights flickered through the windows, Nathan leaned against the doorway, watching Claire pack away the day's files. "You handled that like someone who has done this for years," he said with a grin. She looked up, smiling faintly. "I just told the truth. It was the only thing we had left to give." Nathan nodded slowly. "You once told me I had choices. You were right. But now I am choosing this. Not the headlines, not the company, just what is real." Claire paused, her hand resting on the edge of the desk. "You know this will not be easy." "I do not want easy," he replied quietly. "I want honest." They stood there in the silence of the empty office, the hum of the city filling the space between them. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the tall windows like tiny fragments of light. Nathan reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded paper. When he handed it to her, she recognized it instantly, the original coffee receipt from their blind date, creased but carefully preserved. He smiled. This was where it started. Maybe it should remind us that the best things come from small beginnings. Claire looked down at the receipt, then back at him. "You really kept it all this time?" "Every day," he said. "It reminded me that someone believed in me when I was pretending to be less than I was." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without another word, Claire reached out and took his hand. Outside, the lights of Toronto glimmered across the snow, and the city that had once felt so cold now seemed alive with quiet warmth. Their story had begun with a mistake, had broken under truth, and now, piece by piece, it was being rebuilt on something stronger: trust. And for the first time, both of them knew that what they were creating together was not just a foundation or a story worth telling. It was a life built on the one thing that could never be faked: sincerity. Spring arrived in Toronto slowly, washing the gray streets with soft rain and light. Months had passed since the scandal, and life had found a new rhythm. The Open Hands Foundation thrived again, stronger than ever. Local newspapers now called it the beating heart of the city. Yet for Claire, the real reward was quieter: the laughter of children during community lunches, the grateful smiles of families who no longer felt forgotten, and the calm certainty that she had finally built something real. Nathan kept his promise. He stepped away from Novareach's corporate tower and spent his days working beside her. They shared long hours and late nights, discussing ways to expand outreach, arguing sometimes, laughing often. The distance that had once separated their worlds had vanished, replaced by a partnership that felt equal, earned, and true. One evening, after another long day, Nathan asked Claire to walk with him. The air smelled of rain, and the city lights reflected off the puddles on Queen Street. They passed the café where everything had started, the same window seat, the same soft glow of golden light. Nathan stopped by the door and looked at her with a smile. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. Claire laughed softly. "How could I forget? You were the broke man who could not pay for coffee." He grinned. "And you were the woman who thought she was just being polite." They stepped inside. The café was quiet, the same barista behind the counter, though older now. Nathan ordered 2 coffees, the same way he had before. As they sat down, Claire noticed something different in his eyes, a calm focus, the look of someone who had finally found where he belonged. Nathan reached into his jacket and placed a small velvet box on the table. "I used to think success meant having more," he said. "Then I met someone who showed me that real success is having someone to share it with." Claire's eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant, unpretentious, like everything she loved about him. "No contracts, no disguises, just truth," he said softly. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. Claire stared at the ring, then at him, her chest tight with emotion. She finally smiled, her eyes glistening. "Yes, but this time," she whispered, "I am buying the coffee." Nathan laughed, shaking his head. "Deal." "Come ding." As they raised their cups in a quiet toast, the rain outside turned to a light drizzle, glimmering against the café windows. From strangers to partners, from a mistake to a promise, their journey had come full circle, and when Claire slipped the ring onto her finger, she knew that every choice, every hardship, every small act of kindness had led them exactly here to the place where truth and love finally met. A year later, the city of Toronto glowed under the soft light of early summer. The skyline shimmered over Lake Ontario, and the streets around the Open Hands Foundation buzzed with music and laughter. It was the Foundation's first anniversary, a celebration of a year filled with growth, hope, and countless acts of kindness. Volunteers decorated the hall with string lights and white flowers, the same kind that had filled the tables during the very first dinner they ever hosted. Claire stood at the entrance, greeting guests with a calm smile. She wore a pale blue dress that matched the color of the Foundation's walls. Her heart swelled as she watched the families and children she had once helped now return as volunteers themselves. It was a full circle she could hardly believe. Nathan arrived a little later, dressed simply, carrying a wooden box. He gave her that familiar smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "You did all this," he said quietly. "We did?" Claire corrected. "Together." "Oh." When the speeches began, Nathan took the stage. His voice carried warmth as he looked out at the crowd. "A year ago, we built this place to prove that kindness could change lives. Tonight, I want to remind everyone that it started with one moment, one choice, and one person who believed in something good." He gestured toward Claire, and the room erupted in applause. Claire's eyes filled with tears as Nathan opened the wooden box and lifted out a framed piece of paper. It was the old coffee receipt, faded, creased, but perfectly preserved. Beneath it was the same note she had written all that time ago. "Pay it forward." Nathan smiled. "This little receipt began everything. It reminded me that love and compassion cannot be bought, only shared." He turned toward Claire and continued softly. "So tonight, I want to return it to the person who started it all." He placed the frame in her hands. The crowd clapped again, but Claire barely heard them. Her eyes stayed on Nathan, the man who had once walked into her life as a stranger pretending to be broke, and who now stood beside her as her husband and partner. As the music began and the guests filled the dance floor, Nathan took her hand and led her to the center. "Do you ever think about how strange it was, how we met?" he asked. Claire laughed softly. "Strange, yes, but maybe fate just has a sense of humor." He smiled. "Then I am grateful for every twist it took." They danced slowly, surrounded by the people their kindness had brought together. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars reflected in the lake. When the song ended, Claire rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, "You know, Nathan, I never thought a simple cup of coffee could change my life." He held her close. "It did more than that. It changed mine too." "Oh?" And as they swayed beneath the golden light of the hall, the story that began with a blind date and a single act of kindness came to its quiet, perfect close, proving once again that love built on truth does not need riches to shine. It only needs a good heart and the courage to give.